Good afternoon. Welcome to another edition of Growing in Grace. I'm your host, Chico Whitaker. Today, I'm joined by my co-host, Mercedes Douglas, and she have a host of things that she's going to talk about today. And I just want you to tune in, call a friend, and tell them to watch Growing in Grace because this program guaranteed to be informative today. Uh, Mercedes, can you tell them a little bit about yourself, please?
Yeah, thank you very much for the opportunity to be here today.
Yes.
My name is Mercedes Douglas. I am a Michigan native, and I'm back in Michigan after many, many years. And I am here to talk today a little bit about what's at stake in the current election.
Yes.
And I hope to be able to bring in all of the experience that I have gathered over all of my years of travels that have now led me back to Detroit. I am currently a community organizer, and I want to emphasize that anything I say today are expressly my ideas.
Yes.
But I am coming here with also the experience of having talked to a lot of folks, particularly in the east side of Detroit, and I have the enormous the enormous grace of being able to speak to so many people, have them invite me into their homes and share what's going on in their lives, and I'm very grateful for that, and it's taught me a whole lot. I have, my background is in both education and anthropology, and that's something that I also bring to my understandings of some of the issues that we will speak to today. And I do encourage anybody who is interested in knowing more about anything that I discuss, or finding out how to get access to some of the materials that I've read. I am more than happy to share whatever information I can.
Mm-hmm. Okay. For those who's not familiar with anthropology, can you tell them what that is?
Yes.
I know I studied in Northwestern, and we was talking about the Jabba and the Peking Man and historic things, but can you enlighten us a little bit more about the anthropology before you go into your topic?
Yes, sir. So anthropology literally means the study of humans, but more specifically, it's the study of human culture.
Yes.
And by culture, we refer to the fact that whereas other animals, in order to adapt to their environment, they have to evolve whole new structures in their brains and in their bodies. They might have to, develop fur or get rid of fur, things like that. Humans, by contrast, we think about our intelligence, but really our intelligence is our ability to create culture and to pass it on.
Amen.
And this is where the tremendous benefit of our grandparents and our ancestors come along, because we transmit culture that allows us to adapt to many different environments. And unfortunately, as we go into outer space, we are going to be really challenged to see if we can take some of what we have learned to not make a mess of things there, right? So that's anthropology.
Yeah.
What you were referring to was more of what we call archaeology, which is the study of ancient people who lived in the past. Although
Right.
sometimes archaeologists will often do contemporary studies of things like trash, like what's in our trash and what does it say about us. I am specifically a linguistic and sociocultural anthropologist.
Yes.
I'm very fascinated by language. I really enjoy the study of human interaction and conversation. And so I am well versed in principles of interaction and what happens that can go wrong, go right when people are communicating with one another.
Amen. Okay. Would you want to go into your topic?
Yes.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so as I said, today my goal is really to emphasize some of the key issues that are at stake in this current election. I hope everybody has had the chance to see, either the Democratic Convention, the Republican Convention, the debates between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump, And then most recently, Kamala Harris came to Michigan and gave a talk alongside Oprah Winfrey and several other women, which I think was just beautifully done.
Over the weekend.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I believe it was Friday night maybe that they spoke. I can't remember.
Between Friday and Thursday,
Yeah,
one of those days.
one of those
Right.
days. What I have noticed is that since then, when I'm talking to women in my organizing work, I really have noticed a sudden shift. They're really thinking about some of the impacts, for example, of the lack of abortion care that many women are getting, and
Yes.
they're really engaging with the potential that women could lose that that access to care that we have very much taken for granted.
Right.
And so I want to begin with this one. I know it's a very controversial one, but I just really want to emphasize how crucial it is, because often we moralize this issue in a way that only seems to have bearing on women, and what it says about women. And I hear a lot of things that make it seem like women are potentially just these evil creatures who, at the age of, at 7 months and 9 months pregnant, we're just aborting babies. We're going through all of these months of wear and tear on our bodies and inability to sleep and all of these things. And then just all of a sudden, there's women out there who are deciding at 7 months, 9 months, I don't want this thing. And then not only that there are doctors who are so evil that they're doing this. What we know is that over 90% of women who decide to have an abortion make that decision within about the first 14 weeks.
Right.
Anybody who's having an abortion thereafter, the further we go in time, the more likely it is that woman is making that decision because either her body is in danger, or the life of the child is in significant danger. And if that child were to be born, it would be born into a very brief and painful life. And so a lot of women have to make these difficult decisions. And when we reduce such a decision down to women just being evil or not thinking or not caring, we know this is not the truth at all. And there are tremendous consequences for women in taking this unfair stance to the situation. So let's look at what the situation has been since these abortion bans. Texas started out with a 5-week ban. And in its transition to a full abortion ban, it is one of about 14 states. It's one of 14 states that has a full abortion ban. Since then, it has seen a 56% increase in deaths. And that's just deaths. We're not even talking about women who potentially lose their capacity to have children. We're not talking about women who have to experience the trauma of going through a pregnancy that they know is already failed, right? Because that's traumatic. Women do want these children, especially the farther you get along, the more invested you get in that child that you've never seen. And so if we look at just the deaths, so 56% more, that means on average, there were 17 per 100,000 women who are pregnant dying in 2019. That jumped to 24 per 100,000 in 2020. Now, and that's excluding COVID, because it was actually 27 per 100,000.
Okay.
I mean, we're talking about gun violence type rates when we're talking about women dying in pregnancy. Now, what's even worse, we already know that women of color, particularly Black women in this country, are at even higher risk of complications during pregnancy. It turns out that for Black women in Texas, the risk of death went up 11 points to 39 per 100,000. So we are taking a risk that we already faced, and we have only multiplied it. And I want to also emphasize here, one of the most difficult, I should say, one of the most powerful conversations I had at One Door was a man who pointed out that in the 1960s, when he was just a boy, he was sent to go stay with family members, and he didn't know at the time. He found out later that it's because she had had a pregnancy that failed, and she had to get a rushed DNC. And here is this man who is now, in his early 70s maybe, and he's saying, what would I have lost? His mother went on to live to 85. How
My
many?
Lord.
Yes.
I have a question. Women at a young age,
Yes.
when they get the abortion, to me, it's a stressful decision.
Yes.
I believe as they go older, when they get older, it has maybe a traumatizing effect on them because they get pressure from the Right to Life group. But I also believe with the politicians trying to play either God or telling women what to do, I believe women should be the owner of their own body, whatever they want to do. So I don't understand with the Right to Life group, why do they don't have compassion on the women that's doing this? And sometimes they can't afford a child, or either, they might have sickle cell or they might be sick, and they don't want the child, carrying on with the trade or whatever and everything. So, I believe they have good reasons to do it, and I believe it's the right of choice to me. If
No,
they
and this
want to
is a
do it.
powerful point. One of my best friends is a type 1 diabetic,
Mm-hmm.
and I was there for part of her pregnancy and the actual birth. I mean, that was a lot of stress. When most women are already struggling, she was having to make sure that she was staying on top of her blood sugars.
Yes.
She had to have a plan in place for what happened if somehow she lost consciousness, so that she knew that she would continue to be taken care of. This is not something that someone should go into lightly.
Lightly.
Yes.
I
Yes.
concur.
And, I think we also should keep in mind, if we had a society that made sure that women could get access to affordable health care and daycare, and she knew that all of the things that she would need in order to take care of that child and go to work if she needed to,
Yes.
more women would potentially make that decision to keep a child,
Yes.
right? Rather than having to do an elective abortion.
Right.
So I think we keep getting round back to the point, like you said, is that we have to trust that women are smart enough to know what to do with their own bodies.
Amen.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Yes, and I do just want to reiterate that point that, women's lives are important. My own grandmother had to make the decision to have an abortion. This is a very deeply spiritual person, and her doctors told her, if you have this child, you or the child will be at severe risk.
Mm-hmm.
And I think about this woman who lived to 102.
Right.
And at the age of 102, when she died, her tiny little $400 pension that she earned after 50 years of teaching,
Mm-hmm.
that was still going to take care of my uncle, who was severely bipolar.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Women's labor, the care that we provide to children is crucial,
Mm-hmm.
too crucial to risk.
Amen.
And this brings me, I think, to the issue of the COVID pandemic. Right? I think a lot of people make light of the COVID pandemic because we seem to be in this pattern where we're making light of our health care in general. It's
Right.
only been in the last few years that we've made sure that we have health care available for all.
Amen.
And I think a lot of people misunderstand what happened in COVID. It's crucial to keep in mind that the reason why the COVID pandemic was so chaotic is because one of the first things that Donald Trump did when he became president was to get rid of our pandemic response team,
Yeah.
which had been left in place by Barack Obama.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
And so we should not be surprised that not only did hundreds of thousands of people die in that year, but it was so chaotic. Bodies that had to be left in freezers, in trucks, in hospitals that didn't have all of the protective gear they needed. All of this happened because, this complicated balance that the pandemic team needed to play between having certain things be decentralized, so that as a hospital or as a mayor, as a community, you could tailor the response to your specific community's needs, right? So we needed some decentralization, but we also needed enough centralization so that resources could adequately be sent out.
Okay.
That got turned on its head. Things that needed to be decentralized were centralized. Things that needed to be centralized were decentralized. And that's because we got rid of a COVID protocol that was well worked out, that did not need to be reinvented.
Right.
And the end result of that is that we had, as Robert Reich, if you want to hear a great political commentator who can digest things in just a few minutes, Robert Reich, R-E-I-C-H, is a great guy.
It's ironic you will bring him up.
Yeah.
I was just watching him before I came to the show.
Oh, yeah?
And he was doing an expose on 10 things about Trump pregnancy,
Yes.
and then he went up to 35. And one of the things I found hilarious, that this man was supposed to be a so-called president that was smart, and he was telling people to drink bleach.
Yes.
My.
Yes. Yes.
How ignorant
Yes.
is he?
Right.
I call him tricky Trump and everything,
Yes.
because he tricked people to do things that he wants them to do, and then it sometimes will leave a devastating impression on person's lives.
Yeah. And it leaves us with a very cynical view of reality. A lot of us who fall into his line of thinking.
Right.
Yeah, and Robert Reich points out, if you think about, remember hundreds of thousands of people died in that first year, and if you calculate that out per day, you essentially what you have during the first year is roughly one 9/11 type disaster. In the worst moments, you had one 9/11 disaster happening every day.
Right.
At the best of it, we were having one 9/11 disaster every 3 days. And when I think how quickly we about faced and ended up in an unnecessary war, and put all of those resources for years and years and years into trying to resolve what we thought was the source of the problem in 9/11. And we had to fight so hard to get a solution to COVID. It just emphasizes the lack of concern that we have for healthcare, and the inability of Donald Trump to help Americans understand the gravity of that situation and understand the importance of responding in the most responsible and beneficial ways. Yes. And I would like to emphasize, this brings us into the issue of Project 2025, which hopefully a lot of people already know about. But Project 2025.
Please expand on that, because a lot of people, some are knowing about it, but I believe a lot of people are in darkness what that means and everything
Okay, yes.
from the Trump administration.
So Project 2025 is a document that's about 900 plus pages.
Yes.
And it was published by an organization called the Heritage Foundation, which is essentially a conservative foundation. There's all kinds of religious references in there, so presumably this is also supposed to be an organization that considers itself Christian in its leanings, because a lot of the language in there is such. But I do want to emphasize that these are not the Christian norms that my Protestant grandfather raised me with.
Right.
So many of them are the complete opposite, in fact.
Yes.
But what I want to emphasize here is that on page 89 of Project 2025, the Heritage Foundation goes on and on about China's failings in responding to COVID, about them unwilling to state whatever they believe was the reality of Wuhan and all of this craziness. At the end of the day, We all know that as good parents, we raise our children to take responsibility
True.
for their own decisions and to accept when they've done something wrong and figure out how you improve.
Right.
And yet here we are still going on and on about China and what China did or didn't do. We cannot control anybody else's actions, much less China's.
Correct.
We have to be able to take responsibility for how we respond, even if other people are potentially doing wrong. So that's the only thing we can control,
Right.
right? But this Heritage Foundation published this document, Project 2025, in April of 2023. And it is really disturbing and dystopian to read what it is that they would like to see happen in the United States of America.
Uh-huh.
So going back to the abortion issue, they want to change the name, the Human Services Reproductive Health Care Access Task Force to Pro-Life Task Force. But my question is, when exactly have conservatives really been pro-life? My entire life, I never thought that affordable health care was going to be possible. When
Right.
Barack Obama was able to pass that Affordable Health Care Act in, I believe it would have been 2009 or 2009, I can't remember the year.
Around that time.
Right around that time when he passed it. I had just spent the prior 5 years, most of which without health insurance. And when I did for a brief period, it was unaffordable. When I had my first migraine at the age of 26, I was completely dumbfounded.
Mm.
I was worried that I had had a small stroke, but I didn't have the money to go to the doctor to find out.
Wow.
So I ended up with a migraine condition that only worsened over many years.
My Lord.
And I could have very easily, if I'd been able to go to a doctor in that moment and explain to them what I'd experienced, I would have known right then what was going on with me. And it wouldn't have taken the years that it took.
You mean that people that got an MRI?
Well, I wouldn't even need an MRI. I could have just been able to explain my symptoms to a doctor, and they'd have been able to say, most likely it's migraine.
Okay.
And we will watch your conditions, if your situation, if it doesn't worsen in these particular ways, then we don't need to, yeah.
Right.
So my point here is that we've got to be careful with our assumptions about what all of this language means,
That's right.
And so moving on, I want to also point out unions, because unions are an important part of this issue of life and what it really means to be pro-life. In a 2011 article that the Heritage Foundation put on its site, they tell us that public sector employees, that means postal workers, firefighters, things like that, make more than private sector employees.
Okay.
When you factor in their benefits, make as many as 10 plus, 12% plus more.
Mm-hmm.
They present this like a bad thing. Why would it be a bad thing to know that our unions are making sure that that employees are getting health care, are getting adequate retirements? These are all good things,
Right.
right? And we need to really be asking ourselves whether or not more organizations should be unionized and not less.
And more people need to be in the union in order to sustain a healthy environment and take care of their family.
Yes.
And, be able to have decent health insurance.
Right. Well, and it turns out that in states where we don't have lots of unions, there are fewer people on average with health insurance. But also, it turns out that for people of color, wages tend to be significantly lower.
Right.
Number one, when you're not in a union,
Mm-hmm.
wages increase significantly. And on top of that, the gap between minorities and whites in this country, that lessens once we get to unions. Now, that's not to say that unions don't have some of their own racial problems. They do, and those need to be addressed.
Yes.
But some of those disparities reduce.
Okay.
Yes.
Oh.
Yes,
Yeah,
and just we just have a couple more minutes, so I just want to quickly go over a couple of the really important ones.
Sure.
On page 302 of the of this document, it says that too many children are getting free lunch. By contrast, in Walls's state, right? This is her running mate who would be our vice president. In his state, not only do poor children get free lunch, all children who want it have access to free breakfast and free lunch.
All right, that's good.
This is not just a handout.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that makes parents' lives easier,
Mm-hmm.
and it reduces stigma for children,
Okay.
right?
Mm-hmm.
This is not what nowhere did Jesus ever say that too many children get free lunch,
No.
right? I also want to point out there's a lot of abuse of this word wokeism, for example. You have to remember that the word woke is a concept that has come out of the African American community that meant being aware of what's going on around you, the ways that people are trying to take advantage of you.
Mm-hmm.
And Donald Trump and his ilk have tried to take that word for themselves
Right.
to be something that is evil, to be something that is bad, to be something that is hurting others.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of this that happens in here.
Yes.
Taking over what it means to be concerned about gender discrimination, taking over what it means to be a trans person. There's a lot of this going on in Project 2025 that we need to be careful of.
Okay. You brought out a whole lot of information and everything. Can you emphasize why it's important for not only blacks, for the community to get out and vote, and otherwise to keep this former president from getting in office? Because if it does get back in office, it's going to be chaos, confusion, and calamity. And, you know, we're going to be in the worst shape than we were almost 8 years ago when he was in office and everything.
Yes. It is absolutely crucial to vote. We know, for example, we got Raphael Warnock into the Senate in Georgia, and as a
Right.
result, people with type 1 diabetes can't pay more than $35 for their insulin. That's a change from hundreds to thousands of dollars.
Yes.
That's what voting alone did. That's just one example. Please get out there and vote.
Right. Okay. You have heard from Mercedes Douglas. Is there a contact number or a web page if someone wants to get in contact with you or want you to come talk to their organization or need to just reach out to you for more detail on what the 2025 page is about?
Yes, sir. You can email me at my personal email address, which is M for Mercedes Camille, Camille Douglas, Douglass @gmail.com, or I'm happy to receive questions over my personal phone, which is 407-920-2867. Again, that's 407-920-2867.
Right. You've been listening to Mercedes Douglas. I'm your host, Chico Whitaker. Until next time, go out and vote. And also to hear more about what she was talking about and to hear about some of the things that Donald Trump did or lied about, go to YouTube and go to, what is it, Robert Reich?
Robert Reich, yeah.
Robert Reich, that's R-E-I-C-H. And just Google what some of the things that this liar have said over the years and still want to get back in the White House. Until next time, you've been listening to Growing in Grace. We'll see you soon. Thank you and God bless.